Hello! Welcome! Welcome to Tutorial Tuesday. I'm Shono. I'm going to be doing some drawing. I'm going to show you guys a thing or two today about perspective. We're going to start with some basics, like 1 point, 2 point perspective, and we might do some 3 point if you guys are feeling brave. And yeah, and I'll field questions if you guys have questions at any time today. And yeah, we'll have some fun. Although, admittedly, perspective is probably one of the least fun things to draw. It's very simple, but can be very confusing. So let's get going. All right, so the names for the different type of perspectives, like 1 point, 2 point, 3 point. When you hear 1 point, 2 point, they're talking about vanishing points. Like how many vanishing points are in the drawing that you're making. Let's start with the simple one. Let's start with 1 point. Now, most of the time, not every time, but for 1 point perspective and 2 point perspective, those vanishing points sit on the horizon. So the first thing we got to do is establish where our horizon is. So I'm just going to draw one going across there. That's our horizon. And then we have 1 point sitting on that horizon. And that's going to be our vanishing point here. So it's called a vanishing point because as things, at least the way things look to us, look to our eye, as things get further away, they get smaller. And they get smaller uniformly. The further away things get, like, you don't see things get out of whack. Like, you don't see, like, if a person's walking away from you, their whole body gets smaller at the same rate. You don't see, like, their legs get smaller, but their heads stay the same size, or their head shrink while their body doesn't get any smaller. Everything gets smaller uniformly as it gets further away from us until it reaches a point infinitely away, far away from us, which is that vanishing point where it just disappears. You can't see it anymore. So I'm just going to kind of draw how that would look with 1 point perspective here. So we have 1 point, every line moving away from us is all converging at this 1 point. Now I'm doing this manually. Clip Studio Paint that I'm working with has actually a perspective ruler built into it. So I can do that, and I might do that later on the stream to kind of make things easier for myself. But for right now, I'm just going to do it all manually so you can kind of see how this works if you're drawing on a piece of paper, how you would go about this. Because if you're drawing on paper, you obviously don't have the computer be able to create a whole grid for you. I'm going a little fast here. I should actually, you know what? Let's do this how I would actually do this if I was drawing. What I would do is I would draw. If I was doing this on paper, I would have my ruler up against my paper. I know you can't see my hand touching my screen here, but that's all right. So we're gonna pretend like this line is the ruler. I would just draw a straight line going across and going through that vanishing point. That way I can draw in both directions at the same time. So we'll go here, across that point, point. So the whole point of this is to kind of help figure out how far away things, or how big something should be depending on how far away they are from our viewpoint. I'll do 2 more lines here. All right, that gets the job done. So now we have our grid kind of help guiding us going back into space. And then you want to create some horizontal lines. Now the further away you are, these lines are going to appear to be closer and closer together. As it gets closer to the viewer, more space there's going to be between these lines. And so now we have a basic perspective grid here. Do it on the side here. Now if you were doing this manually, you don't necessarily have to draw this grid out all on your own. What's important if you're doing this all manually is to make sure you have where the horizon is and where the vanishing point is, and everything else you can kind of figure out from there. So let's turn this blue here and kind of show how this works. So let's say I'm drawing a character, right? I'm not going to get into a lot of detail here. I'm just going to do kind of stick figures. And this figure is standing right there. So he's between this line here and this one here. So if I was to draw a character of a similar height, I would follow these guidelines here. So that same character, if he was walking away, his head here is between these 2 lines, so his head's going to be between those 2 lines here. His left foot would be here. His right foot would sit on the other side of that same line. So that's what I was saying earlier about the perspective characters or anything uniformly gets smaller as it gets further away. So, how would this apply if I were to draw a building? A very, very square building. Well, first, what we would do is draw. Let me get these lines a little bit thicker here. So first thing I would do is draw essentially a rectangle. This is the side of a building that's facing us. It's just going to be square-ish, rectangle-ish, and that's all there is to it. There's not going to be anything fancy about it. Now, to get this to go into perspective, what's really important is that you line up the corner of that square to our vanishing point. And you draw that line. Now, you don't want it to go all the way to the vanishing point. Remember that the vanishing point is an infinite distance away. But you want it to move in that direction towards the vanishing point. Same thing on the bottom. You're going to line up the corner here to your vanishing point. But naturally, you don't want it going all the way to the vanishing point. And then you're going to do a vertical line to connect the 2 sides. Now, this happens to me all the time, where I go too long on one side. Don't be tempted. I see this a lot with my students. Tempted to want to connect the 2 sides, and you'll get something like that. That obviously doesn't look right. When we're talking 1-point perspective, the vertical is always going to be vertical. It's never going to lean any other direction. So we'll just take out that extra. Any windows that might be on this side of the building are also going to try to go to this vanishing point. the tops and the bottoms of the window are going to go towards the vanishing point, where the horizontal is going to go straight up and down. That's another thing I see very often with my students who are learning this. And when I say students, I mean all ages. I don't mean like 5-year-olds, although they have trouble with this too. But like, I teach all ages, and it doesn't matter if they're 10 or 40. I see this a lot. This want or desire to kind of tilt the windows so, or anything that's on this plane, to make it more square. And obviously, that's not the case. Windows are straight up and down. Doors are going to be straight up and down. The walls are going to be straight up and down. So you want to make sure that's the case. Same thing if we do a door here. The sides of the door are going to be straight up and down, but we don't... a common mistake is we know that a box is parallel, right? So we want to make all the edges parallel, but this top of the door isn't going to be parallel with the bottom of the windows here. That doesn't look quite right. You want to make sure you line up the corner to the vanishing point. So in that case, the door is going to look like this. I do another set of windows. It's going to go towards the vanishing point here. This is going to go down this way. And this applies to just everything moving towards that vanishing point. If I do any windows on this side of the building, it's just going to be regular old square windows. Nothing fancy here, although I'm making them rectangles. It's not really a square, but that's not important. Anything on this side of the building is just going to be normal and square, parallel sides, everything. But anything on this side of the building here has to go towards the vanishing point. So, and now that applies to everything. Well, let's do a sidewalk here. A really simple sidewalk. So I'm just going to draw one side of the sidewalk going towards the vanishing point, another here, just a little edge there. All right. So I'm sure you guys have all seen sidewalks. You guys all seen how they're like horizontal. There's like horizontal parts, each segment of that sidewalk. Again, a lot of students, because they want everything to be perpendicular to each other, they want to make these divisions of the sidewalk perpendicular. And it makes sense because, again, we know that the sidewalk is square. We know that squares have parallel sides to each other. The top is perpendicular to the left. And so we have the top here, and we want to make the next side perpendicular. But that's not the case. Because it's flat on the ground, it has to go straight across. And it just like when we're making our grid, they're going to get closer together as they get further away, get bigger as they get away from us, or closer to us. So that's that so far. I'm gonna pause for half a second just to see if anyone has any questions, and to take some delicious water. All right, so we're going to stay on 1-point perspective here for a minute more, and let's talk about inside a room. Now, inside a room, we have an interesting difference compared to an outside, like what we did here with this building and sidewalk here. When we're inside, we can't see the horizon. We can't. There's a wall in the way. So when we're creating our room in 1-point perspective, our wall, or more accurately, the floor, where our wall meets the floor, has to be below the horizon. We can't have the floor be on the horizon. That means the floor of our room is infinitely far away. And obviously, if we're inside a room, the room can't be infinitely far away. So that means the floor has to be below the vanishing point. And just like, I'm going to make this a little easy on myself. I'm going to create that ruler. Perspective. So once you kind of establish where the wall and the floor is, all you have to do is just, again, take your ruler. If you're doing this traditionally, just take your ruler, line up the corner of the room here to the vanishing point, and then just draw a line. Whoops. Draw a line moving out from there. Same thing up here. We're going to line up the corner of the room to our vanishing point. We're going to draw a line going out from there. Line up this dot, or the vanishing point to the corner. And line up the dot. You know what? Let's do this. Make it even easier on myself. There we go. Okay, so line up the dot to the corner of the room. Bam. Dot to the corner of the room. Dot to the corner of the room. And the vanishing point to the corner of the room. Out. So this is our 1-point perspective room. Now, if we're going to put anything in this room, I don't know, like some kind of furniture here. You want to make sure the furniture sits on the floor. Very common, I see students who want to draw our furniture kind of floating in space here. But you have to make sure it's on the floor. So I always start with this rectangle shape, or whatever shape furniture you're trying to draw. And I always start with a rectangle, a rectangle-ish shape, and then it's just a matter of lining the corner of that rectangle to the vanishing point here. Line up the corner of our object going to the vanishing point. Line the corner here going to the vanishing point. And then we just use our perpendicular, straight up and down, or horizontal lines to line it all up. Straight up that way. Now this is a little tricky here, but you're going to take from this corner and just go straight across. We'll place that little extra there. And again, let's just say we're making like a dresser or something. The drawers are going to go towards this vanishing point. If we did a window, say we have a window above the dresser for some reason, the left and the right part of the window is going to be straight up and down, but the top and the bottom are going to move towards this vanishing point. Pretty simple. Now, I say it's simple because on paper it is, or not literally on paper, but like, you know what I mean. Because all you're doing is just line up your ruler from the corner of the object to the vanishing point. That's all this is. But it can get very confusing because anything that is above the horizon is going to try to move down towards that vanishing point. So we're not going to see the top of it. But anything below the vanishing point, or I'm sorry, below the horizon, is going to move up towards the vanishing point, which means we will be able to see the top. And sometimes that can get really confusing if you're not 100% sure which way these lines should be moving. So you want to make sure you really take the time to take your ruler and combine, or not combine it. Man, today is a long day. But yeah, take the time to rule it all out. Hold on one second, guys. Okay, so that's 1 point perspective. Here's a couple pitfalls I want to address real quick. Like with this part here, where you can only barely see the top of the dresser, I see very often people who want, because they think they need to see more of the top, they'll kind of draw the top of the dresser like that. You're going to end up getting this almost like a weird slope to the top of our dresser, or anything. If you're drawing a building, anything cubish, if you feel like you need to see more of that top and you do something like that, you're going to have this weird tilted shape, and you obviously want to avoid that. And I already addressed how you want to make sure anything that is perpendicular up and down stays up and down. Anything that is horizontal stays horizontal. It's only things moving forward and backwards that's going to go towards that vanishing point. And the last tip I want to give with 1 point perspective is placement of the horizon. Like here I put the horizon pretty much in the middle. But if you want 1 point perspective, but you want to have it feel like you're looking up a little bit more, you just lower the horizon here. If the horizon is lower, remember what the horizon is. The horizon divides the sky from the ground. So if the horizon is lower, there's more sky, which is going to give your people looking at your artwork, it's the feeling that they're looking up because they see more sky. So obviously the reverse is going to be true. If you put the horizon high on your paper or on your art, there's going to be less sky and more ground, and it's going to give the impression to the people looking at your artwork that they're looking down onto the ground. And with that is 1 point perspective in a nutshell. Are there any questions before I move on to 2 point perspective? I will take your silence to mean everything's good, but I say this every week. Feel free, guys, to throw your questions in the chat. If I ask for questions and I move on and you still had questions, throw them in the chat. I will happily answer them. I have no problem interrupting myself for that. Very informative for interiors. Good, I'm glad. All right. So we're going to do the same thing that we just did, but with two-point perspective. I'll kind of show how it looks on outside and then kind of how it might look with interiors. So now, as you would imagine, two-point perspective means there's two vanishing points on the horizon. Now, when we're talking two vanishing points, more times than not, those vanishing points are not going to be on your piece of paper or on your drawing or in your comic book panel. They're probably going to be off panel. But for the examples here, I'm going to put them right on the image here. I'm going to put them right on the edges. So I'm going to put vanishing point 1 on this edge, vanishing point 2 on this edge. And again, just to make it a little bit easier on myself, I'm going to create this grid. Two-point perspective grid. And I guess I'll mention it since I'm using it. For those of you who use Clip Studio Paint, if you go into the perspective ruler, you'll get something like this for 2-point. This, I don't know how well it's showing up. I think hopefully it's showing up okay. There's this straight blue line, that's the horizon. Line that up to where you want your horizon to be. This little blue dot here, you can control where vanishing point number 1 is. I'll put that right on the edge. And this blue dot here is vanishing point number 2. I'm going to put that on that edge. Now, the whole point of two-point perspective is to basically, where one-point perspective we were looking down, like a street or down a hallway, two-point perspective is if we're looking at the corner of something, like the corner of a room, or the corner of a building. Now, unlike one-point perspective, where everything that was horizontal stayed horizontal, everything that was vertical stayed vertical, it was just the left, the forward and back that went towards the vanishing point. For two-point perspective, everything that is moving left or right is going to one or the other vanishing point. The only thing that's going to stay parallel with the sides of the piece of paper is your vertical. So we're going to have a grid that looks something like this. I was doing that. Okay. So everything is going to move towards this vanishing point. So everything that is moving to the left, or I'm sorry, to the right, is going to that right vanishing point. And then everything moving to the left is going to go to this left vanishing point. This can get a little trippy on your eyes. But this is nothing compared to what three-point perspective is. So we'll maybe get to that in a sec. All right. So that's basically the two-point perspective grid. So let's turn this to blue. Let's create a new layer. So let's use a street as our example here, like we did last time. Like I said, we're going to be looking at the corner of buildings here. So I'm going to start with the vertical line. That's going to be the corner of my building. So the right side of my building is going to go towards this right vanishing point. Make this line a little bit thicker here. So the bottom and top of the right side of the building is going to move towards the right vanishing point. And the bottom and top of the left side of the building is going to go towards the left vanishing point. And the same thing goes with everything else that you're going to draw on this building. So if the doors, the left and the right side are still going to be vertical, but the top and the bottom are going to go towards this right vanishing point. The windows I do here, the left and the right part of the window is going to be vertical, but the top of the window, the bottom of the window is going to move towards this left vanishing point. Let's see. So same thing if we're going to draw that sidewalk that we used in the last example. Oops. The sidewalk's moving towards the left, so it's going to go towards the left vanishing point, or on this side, it's moving towards the right. But then, where those divides that we were talking about before, the divides are going to move towards this right vanishing point. Until we get to the corner, and then those divides are going to move towards the left vanishing point. Now, this can get really, really confusing. So, this is something that takes a lot of practice to do. Because once you start drawing a bunch of buildings, or really anything, you start getting confused at which direction the building or the grid should be moving at. You have to fight this urge to make the sides parallel to each other. Especially the closer you get to the vanishing point. The closer you get to the vanishing point, the more steep the line's going to be. So if I draw a building right here, oops. Hold on a second. Got a little bit off here. All right. So this building here, I might not feel like it should, but the top of the building is going to come down at this really steep angle. So the taller your building is and the closer it gets to this vanishing point, the steeper that angle is going to be. And everything in your brain is going to say, that's not right, I need to change it, I need to make it more perpendicular. Or more parallel with the ground. Fight that urge. Just draw it. Draw it the way that the perspective says it should. Just trust that if you go to the vanishing point, it's going to be right. So let's see how this applies to the insides. So just like with drawing 1 point perspective here, when we're drawing 2 point perspective, we can't have the floor be on the horizon. The floor has to be below the horizon, has to be below the vanishing point. So I like to, if I'm drawing a room at 2-point perspective, I like to do the same thing that I just did with the building. I like to start with the corner. So this is going to be the corner of my room. Now this is the trick here. Instead of having we were doing a building, we had the left side of the building go towards the left vanishing point, and we had the right side of the building go to the right vanishing point. But when we're drawing inside, it's the opposite. The left wall here is going to move towards the right vanishing point, and the right wall is going to move towards the left vanishing point. So like this. So that's going to be the corner of our room. Actually, let's change that a little bit here. Let's make the room just a little bit bigger to work in here. So again, the left side of my room is going to move towards the right vanishing point, and the right side of my room is going to move towards the left vanishing point. And everything that we draw in this perspective, it doesn't matter if it's going to be furniture or windows, it all follows the same trends here. So if I'm drawing a window, the left and right part of the window is still going to be vertical, but the top is going to move towards this right vanishing point. And the bottom's going to move up towards that vanishing point. If I was going to do a dresser, again, we want to make sure it sits on the ground. Let's make it a little bit shorter here. So anything on the wall, the left side of the wall is going to move towards the right vanishing point. The right wall is going to move towards the left vanishing point. But with this dresser that I'm drawing here, the right side of the dresser, it's almost like how we did the buildings. The right side of the dresser is going to go towards the right vanishing point, and the left is going to go towards the left vanishing point. This is a poorly designed room, but we're going to just... I don't know who the interior decorator is, but here we are. All right, so since I need to still draw the top of this dresser, and I see this all the time, not knowing exactly where this line should be, I see people want to draw this line kind of parallel, and then parallel here, and we get this kind of weird lumpy shape. Or, this I see all the time more. I see almost like a connection between the two sides here. So this, what should be a cube kind of becomes like a triangle shape. Or I often see something that looks like this, where we have a very lopsided top here. So you want to avoid all of that. And make sure you're taking the time to line up your ruler to the vanishing point. If you make sure you do that, even if the top of the box is very, very slim and you can only see a little bit of it, it's still right. You have to fight your brain telling you it doesn't look right. We live in a 3D world, and we know in that 3D world A box has parallel sides. The left and the right, the top and the bottom, front and the back, they're all parallel with each other. But when we're drawing in 2 dimensions, that's not true. And we have to fight that instinct to make it parallel. Even though we know in reality it's parallel, it's not in 2D. I'm going to draw another example where we can see the top of the box here. So if we have the thing here, another rule of thumb to keep in mind, the closer or the lower you are from the horizon, the more of the top you can see. The closer you are to the horizon, the less of the top you can see. And once you go above the horizon, you can't see the top anymore, but you'll start to see the bottom. So the higher you get above the horizon, the more of the bottom of whatever it is you're looking at will be visible. So here's the corner of my box. I'm drawing it going towards the vanishing point this way, towards the left vanishing point this way. Then we gotta get the top, so it goes from this left corner to the right vanishing point, the right from here to the left vanishing point. That's the gist of 2-point perspective. I know I'm kind of going through this a little bit on the quicker side. So if you have any questions, please let me know. Or if you would like me, even if you don't have questions, but you want me to elaborate on something, like maybe I just glanced over something too quickly, you want me to do it again, draw it again, explain it again, do another example, I am totally okay with all of that. So let me know if you have any questions, concerns, you want me to redraw something, re-explain something, and I'll give you guys a sec to do that, and if there aren't any, then we'll move on to 3-point perspective, which is very confusing. Good old water. All right. All right, so moving on to 3-point perspective. This one is confusing, where 1 and 2-point perspective, we were looking straight on at the horizon, or even if the horizon was a little bit higher or lower, you can still see the horizon. But with 3-point perspective, we cannot. It's like looking up at a very, very tall building. If you're looking up at the Empire State Building, you can't possibly see the horizon. The horizon is below your ability to see. So if we're looking up or down, if you're at the top of the Empire State Building and you're looking down, and you're looking at the ground, you can't see the sky or where the ground meets the sky because you're looking straight down. So that's what makes 3-point perspective hard, is because you have to imagine where the horizon is, but you can't see the horizon. So let me create my ruler here. So we're going to create a 3-point perspective ruler. So what you'll see here, so we have one vanishing point that's pretty high, and then we have to move the horizon down here because we can't see the horizon. If we're looking up at something very tall, we can't possibly see that where the horizon is. So 3-point perspective in a lot of ways is if you combine 2-point perspective with 1-point perspective. So we have 2-point perspective down here on the horizon that we can't see, and then we have the 1-point perspective at the high point of the object that we're looking at. So we're going to use a building again for an example. Buildings are fairly simple to understand perspective-wise. So the way this is going to work then, I'm not going to draw the whole grid this time because if you thought 2-point perspective's grid was confusing, 3-point is just makes your eyes bleed. So anything that moves up to now, anything that was vertical, moving straight up and down, was always parallel with the side of our piece of paper. 1-point and 2-point perspective. The 3-point perspective, that's no longer true. The 3-point perspective, anything vertical is going to be moving to this single point of perspective, single vanishing point. Where anything moving horizontal is going to move to the bottom 2 vanishing points. So let's see this in action here. So I'm going to draw the corner of my building, which does look like it's straight up and down, but that's just the corner. If I draw the sides of that same building, it's going to be tilted here. Because all these 3 vertical lines are trying to get towards the vanishing point that's above my piece of paper here. And now I gotta draw the sides, the horizontal. Just like when we're doing 2-point perspective, the left side of the building is going to go towards the left vanishing point, the right side of the building is going to go towards the right vanishing point. So it's going to look something like this. And that's how things are going to carry on for everything in this piece. So the horizontal parts of the windows are going to go towards the bottom vanishing point. The vertical parts of these windows are going to go towards the vanishing point above the piece of paper. Everything on the left side of the building is going to go towards the left vanishing point. Everything on the right side of the building is going to go towards the right vanishing point. And anything vertical is going to go towards the vanishing point at the top. So you might be thinking, how does this apply to if you're drawing an interior? And the answer is the same. Let's delete this here. All right. So let's pretend we're inside a room, but like we just did looking up, let's pretend we're looking down. So we're going to create our vanishing points, 3-point perspective, where when we were looking up, this top vanishing point was above us. We want it to now be below us because we're looking down. And because we're looking down, the horizon is going to be above us. So now we're going to draw a room here. So I'm going to start with the corner of the room, just like I've been starting with the corner here. And I have the left side here, right side here. Now this might not look like anything fancy right now, but again, let's say we want to draw windows, the vertical parts of the window are going to all move towards this below vanishing point. Same thing on this side, we're going to come down. So everything vertical is moving towards the vanishing point below us. Everything on the left side of the room, or more accurately, everything on the left wall of the room is moving towards the right vanishing point. And everything on this side here is everything on the right side of the wall of the room is moving towards the left vanishing point. And this even applies if you want to draw people in here. So let's say, whoops, now I want to draw a person standing in this room. Obviously, I'm not going to draw a lot of details right now, but this person is going to follow the perspective of the room. Very ugly looking person. But hopefully you get the point to see how that one person will fit into a 3D space. So, does that all make sense? Any questions? While I wait for questions, I'm going to show you how I've applied this. So here's a comic book page I'm working on here. So panel 1, you can't really see the difference too much because everything's straight on. There's not really a whole lot of depth happening here. If you look at panel 2, it's still pretty straight on, but you can see the objects here moving back into perspective. Back into 1-point perspective to be exact. The table, if I trace the table line going back, this toolbox coming back, the vanishing point's right about there. You can trace this line going back, yeah, so right about here is where that vanishing point is. On panel 3, we have 3-point perspective happening here. You can see the how everything is kind of moving up towards a vanishing point that's probably right about up here. And very similar on this panel, we have everything moving up towards a vanishing point that's probably right about here. And then we do a reversing on this last panel where, again, we're in 3-point perspective and everything is moving down, or all the vertical is moving down to a vanishing point right about here, give or take. So that's kind of how it applies to your drawings, to your comics, whatever you want to do for any kind of illustrative or artistic job. It's really important to understand how this works. How do you get that 3D effect? Yeah, and this went a little bit faster than I originally anticipated, but that's really all the basics of perspective. So I guess I want to open it up for a minute or 2 or 10 or however many it takes to see if you guys have any questions on perspective, if you want me to elaborate on anything. If you want me to demonstrate anything, draw anything again, I'll be happy to do so. So let me know what you guys think. Was this helpful, Doug? All right. So, what I think I'm going to do for at least a little bit of time, until you guys either are sick of me or I get tired of drawing, is I'll just kind of show you guys how I'll do this from scratch with the comic book page here. So here we have the pencils of a comic book page. Let me get all the word balloons out of here so they're not distracting. So let's do panel 3 here. That looks like a 2-point perspective page or panel. Three-point perspective's kind of blowing your mind. All right. Actually, let's do the panel 2 here. All right. So panel 2 is essentially 2-point perspective. So let me get in my perspective ruler. Yeah, 2-point can be very intimidating. Honestly, even 1-point can be intimidating. I had a student not too long ago. She was in her 40s. She went to school for graphic design. She had all the training, college training on it, but then hadn't drawn for 3 decades, 2 decades. And she really struggled with just 1-point perspective, and she had all the prior training for it, so it can get really confusing. All right, so when I penciled this panel here, I kind of loosely measured out the perspective, but I wasn't super careful with it. So what I have to do here is try to line up my perspective ruler as close as I can to how I originally penciled it. So I want to stay true to my original pencils, but since I wasn't careful with my perspective, my pencils aren't exactly correct. A little bit. I think that's... Check this side. That's pretty close. All right, so switch my drawing tool here, and now I'm going to draw all these parts of the stairs. Now, stairs can be really hard, especially if the stairs start below your eye level and then go above your eye level. Trying to match up the perspective of that can be very tough. So I'm going to start here. That's going to come all the way down to there. And I'm going to follow my own advice. I'm going to not go where I think the stairs should be going, but just trust that the perspective grid is correct. Just follow the lines down. Something like that. So since all these stairs are above the horizon, they're all going to be moving downwards towards the vanishing point. I can give you guys a couple tips when just drawing environments in general. You want to put, it's kind of a cheap trick, but it really works. Putting lines very close together will give you a sense of depth to whatever it is you're drawing. So instead of just drawing a smooth edge, putting several lines next to each other kind of gives it a little bit of a dimension. It looks more realistic and less smooth. So Gear here is walking down these stairs. It's looking pretty good so far. From her office up here. So let's get this office door drawn. That's a little too big. That looks a little bit better. So to follow my own advice, I'm going to give this door a little bit of depth. I'm going to draw a few lines pretty close to each other here. Now I'm not going to put in the lettering here where it says office just yet. I want to make sure that I get the sign here. You want to make sure when you do letter, like making signs, you want to make sure they follow the rules of perspective as well. I think the office has a little bit of a window here where she can look out on the work floor and see what everyone's up to. So ideally, so I'm just making sure I get this right. So if the floor of her office is here, that means, yeah, that makes sense for where a window would be. That's making sense. Let's see. Let's see. Her door. Her door probably has one of those like frosted windows. So I'm not repeating myself over and over again. One, because I think that's annoying, and two, hopefully you guys can see it. But every line that I'm putting down, since this is in two-point perspective, every line either is going towards the vanishing point that's here, or the vanishing point that's over here. Every single line I put down. Let's see how this is looking so far. Not bad so far. So let's see. My original pencils here looks like there's like kind of a brick background, so that bricks are always a pain in the neck because they all have to be in perspective. That's alright. That's why we have this ruler, to make sure all our lines are in perspective. Now, if some of you guys have come late, we're talking about perspective here. I spent a little bit earlier talking about 1-point, 2-point, and 3-point perspective, and now I'm kind of demonstrating how that would work with some comic making, because backgrounds in comics are super, super important. So I'm inking my comic Shadows of Oblivion. If you guys want to read that, a new page comes out soon. When I say soon, I mean tomorrow. Alright, let's see. It's looking pretty good. Alright. Hey, welcome, Seth. Came just in time. You missed my whole lecture. Maybe I should lecture you like you're late to a college exam. Mr. Seth, you're late again. Since I've kind of moved on to the practical application of glad you like that one, Doug. The practical application of using perspective. If you guys have any questions on what I'm doing or why I'm doing it, don't hesitate to ask. Why I do Tutorial Tuesdays is so we can, hopefully so people can learn a thing or two. And I am hoping you guys can see, you know, as I'm constructing this, how just following the grid, not so much my sketch there, but just following the grid, just trusting that everything is moving towards that vanishing point, helps build this believable 3D environment for our characters to be in. You might have noticed also I'm drawing the background before I even draw the character. I'm not just doing that because, you know, the whole focus today is on perspective, but I'm doing that because you can have your character exist in a more believable 3D environment if you draw that environment first. If you try to draw your environment around the character, you are likely to end up with some weird inconsistencies, I guess, for lack of a better term. Things might start getting wonky, is what I'm trying to say. So if you establish the background, establish the perspective of that background, and then place your character in that background, it's going to feel more like they are part of a real living space and not just 2D characters in a comic book. And because I like to draw everything very... I like to draw each part and let it overlap. I usually do a lot of different layers so I can draw, make it look good. Oops. And then I can erase or clean up the different layers and combine them to keep them from getting too confusing. For instance, I drew this banister here, so now I'm gonna kind of just take some white here. Pretty good. So we need to do the vertical parts, and then we can start drawing the character. Save and save often. Now, cool thing that Manga Studio or Clip Studio Paint does here is I can have all these different layers, and my ruler, my perspective ruler, is down on this layer here. But if I click on a different layer where this banister is, and then I hit the check mark next to where the ruler is, this layer now will follow that ruler. So I don't have to apply the same ruler over and over and over again. I can just do one ruler, and that way every layer I can be positive is sitting in the same perspective. So let's do, oops. Let's do the vertical parts of this banister here. Keep it kind of consistent. Switch back over to and when I'm all done here, I am going to combine all these layers. For now, while I'm building, I like to keep them all the same, like that. So how's everyone doing on this Tuesday night? Right, so let's get rid of that. Alright, so I want to do this other banister on the other side of the stairwell, but I gotta make sure I line it up properly. I can't just arbitrarily throw a banister down. If I don't measure it out, it's going to look funny. So, I'm going to, in my perspective ruler here, since banisters are going to have to be even with each other, if I follow the line down this way, so I hit about where I think it should be on the wall. So right about here, that will be the starting point for the banister on the other side, and I can draw that down. Now, I don't have to be too careful because gear's going to be covering up part of this. Oops, not bad. Little anchors here. And that's something I am going to do also sooner or later, is start adding in some like shadows and other things that help with the texture and the values for the page. But first I always like to just lay everything out first, so I know where everything is. It's looking pretty good. Back on my sketch. Whoops, made a mistake. No big deal though. So I think I'm just going to add in a drop shadow here to kind of show the underside of the platform. And I don't think I'm going to get into drawing gear tonight. I think, since again, we're just focusing on perspective, I think I'm just going to stick with this platform that she's kind of walking down. So I'm going to add some drop shadows here. Oh, that's not going to work. I'm going to have to combine these layers soon. I'm starting to get confused. And then the last thing I think I'm going to do here, at least for tonight, let's add some bricks here, because the stairs are still up against this brick wall, so we still got to get some of that texture in there. Some of this is going to be handled with screen tones too, so I'm not too concerned. But there we go. we have an environment drawn in using what we've talked about with perspective. This was 2-point perspective. And yeah. So let's see. We've been doing this for about 90 minutes. I guess I'll open it up for questions. Does anyone have any questions about perspective, how to apply perspective, how to know when each type of perspective is appropriate? Now is a good time to ask if you want to know. Probably before this panel's done, I'll probably end up putting some more texture into it. Kind of like what I did over here. Kind of put some thumbprints in there, maybe some more shadows. I still gotta draw gear, of course. But I think, unless you guys have any questions or would like me to elaborate any more, I think we can maybe call it done. Alright. Yeah. So, if you like what you've seen, why not give me a follow? You can always support me on Patreon. You can go read my comics. Like I said, next page of Shadows of Oblivion's up on shadowsofoblivion.com. Yeah. Do all the things I'm supposed to tell you to do, all the call to actions. You know, support me, donate. My next stream for sure is going to be Saturday, but if I can get my taxes done in time, I want to do a stream either Thursday afternoon or Friday evening. But it does depend if I get my taxes done on time. So keep an eye out for that. If you follow me on the social medias, you can. I'll be announcing that stuff as it happens, and yeah, thank you guys. That's all I can say. Thank you for taking the time out of your night, watching me draw. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully it was educational. Hopefully I took something that's usually very complicated and made it a little bit easier to understand. And yeah, let's do it. Thank you everyone, and I will see you at least on Saturday, if not Thursday or Friday. So bye guys. Thank you so much.